there's this one thing that my mom does quite often, and it is when I remembered when in the last general election results, she was predicting that the victor would win, and she was so convinced, and she kept telling me that they will win, and they indeed won.
Wow!
And what she did was she was bragging to everyone, saying that she predicted the outcome correctly, but I'm sure that is a hint of hindsight bias.
Yes.
Because I'm not sure if she had come up with the prediction from her own rational or logical decision making. I don't think so. So, Mom, if you're watching this, you really need to hear our discussion, because we have in the studio with us SHAZEEMA MASHOOD, the Director and Clinical Psychologist of WECARE Allied Health Centre, and we'll be speaking about hindsight bias.
Welcome on the show.
All right, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a very interesting topic.
It is.
Right. So it's honestly, I feel like this is my first time actually hearing the term for it, because it's also known as the "I knew it all along" phenomenon, or dalam bahasa Melayu, yelah saya tahu semua.
Betul lah saya tu.
Saya lah yang tahu tu. You know, I predicted it correctly, like what Nabil has given example of the mom, which is it happens all the time. Yeah, without realizing as well. Now I'm like, I have a name to it. So clinically speaking, what does hindsight bias mean, or the proper medical definition for it?
Okay, so properly it would mean the tendency to actually look at an unpredictable event as a something predictable to yourself. So if you, like, once again, it's actually called the "I knew it all along" phenomena. Okay, so generally, actually, no one really can guess an outcome of any event. But this is what happens when sometimes you look at it and then someone says, I knew it. That was supposed to happen because I was, I was telling you all about the signs and everything. And that sort of happens unconsciously for most people. Actually, people don't really realize that happens. And in psychology, we don't really say that, people have hindsight bias and, you go and say, this is a problem, this is a huge problem. No, it just happens. And people don't really talk about this because it's a very, it's just a term that we use in psychology. And we actually, usually discuss very, very serious topics rather than hindsight bias. So today, a lot of people are going to know what it is, actually.
But I want to SHAZEEMA, because sometimes when I get my predictions correct, I can get very confident of myself. And that, for me, I view it as a one benefit of hindsight bias. And also maybe others can learn from my prediction. Maybe they can learn from it. I wonder if that is true, and if you have any idea of negative effects of hindsight bias.
Okay, yes, of course. Then you get confident, that I predicted that event, and maybe later on you would think like, your decision making is really good. But there is also a negative effect, which would mean that you actually become overconfident. That every time, some event happens, you think that you predicted the event, and hence, your decision making is not very good, because you don't assess the situation, you don't look at the risk, you don't look at the benefits, the pros and the cons, and you just make a decision very, very fast. So that is also a danger to it. So somehow or other, there are some people who do this quite a lot more than other people, actually. Those people are pretty much quite overconfident about, how they make decisions. But whether we can actually stop that from happening, it's something that we can discuss about.
Very, very interesting. Can you give us some of the examples of hindsight biases, or a situation, or just so our audiences can have a further a better understanding or better picture of what actually is hindsight bias?
Right. Okay, so one of the biggest thing I think is maybe you're watching a football match, right? There's two teams, and obviously you can't really tell who's going to really win. You're going to be supporting one or the other. But there are a lot of times that people will say, yeah, I knew it all along that team was going to win, or maybe the World Cup. I knew it, that team was going to win, and they keep going on and on about it. That is one example. Another example is perhaps, I think a lot of people perhaps have actually watched a murder mystery movie, right? When you watch the movie, you look at the events, and there's like so many suspects. And there's so many suspects, and you'll be like, I think this is the person. I think this is the person. I think this is the person. But when the outcome, you finally find out that that person A is the person who actually killed that person, you'll be like, I knew it all along. See, these were the things that I said, see, I told you so.
Oh my gosh, you're coming back to like every single competition I've been in. It's like, yeah, I knew it, man. I knew it is going to win. Yeah, this one's going to win. And then when they come back to me, I'll be like, guys, it's instinctual experience, It's because of this, but it's not proper logical answers. I'm like, it's my mind is turning. Now I'm going to apologize to Nabil's mak. Mak, minta maaf, mak. You and I in the same boat.
Yeah. And I love that murder mystery example, actually. And I'm going to blame another family member of mine because my sister does this a lot. Whenever she watches a murder mystery, she will be like, I know this person is the murderer. Akak, you're not right all the time. All right. But other than that, SHAZEEMA, I want to ask, maybe when a person has the tendency of hindsight bias, when they have that habit, sometimes they don't know that they have it, and sometimes they don't even know it exists in the first place, and they don't know the negative consequences of having hindsight bias. How, if I am someone with hindsight bias, but I don't know it, how do I know it, to those who are watching at home?
You see, now that's the complicated part. Unless you watch the show, then you're going to know what hindsight bias is, because this is something that we don't really discuss about a lot in psychology. So once again, unless, people have that particular insight or information about hindsight bias, then they perhaps can tell the person, hey, I think you have hindsight bias. Maybe you need to re-examine how you make decisions and that you're overconfident about it. Because the only way to actually, try to avoid hindsight bias is to actually go back and look at the event that happened and see what were the facts that you were looking at in the beginning. Because, we tend to only pick out the things that will support the outcome. But actually, during that process of decision making, or that time when you were watching it, you actually were clueless. So it's for you to go back and look and reassess it, I think.
Awareness is very important, actually.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm actually wondering what causes hindsight bias. Why do we have this tendency? Because I love doing this watching movies. Because you brought up murder mysteries. So I love watching movies, and I will be like, we're predicting this. There's this thing called foreshadowing as well in film. So I tend to do that because I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna foreshadow this. Yeah, Iron Man's gonna die here because this was predicted here. So for somebody like me who is basing my conclusion based on like this foreshadowing. Why do I want to do that? What's a tendency, or what causes a person to make this deduction not based on facts, but just based on like, oh yeah, I knew it lah. I knew it. It feels like more instinctual at this point.
I guess it's a feel-good feeling that you actually are able to predict something that is going to happen. It makes you feel good, actually.
It does,
you think that, I actually predicted that outcome. So one of the things, motivation is one of it, You feel like, you feel good about it. That's the reason why it sort of happens. But the causes of it, like, why it actually happened is because your memory has distortion. So you misremember certain facts about what happened in the beginning before the outcome happened, you see. So you only remember those things that were relevant to the outcome, but you don't remember the other parts. So there is a memory distortion over there, and also perhaps it's also your belief and that, some things are just inevitable, or some things are very predictable, or you can foresee what happens. So your own belief of such would also cause it. But my general understanding is, because I've gone through it before, I knew it all along, sort of, phenomenons all these years. I think it's always just makes me feel good to think that I knew it all along. It's comforting.
Yeah, it is.
Right? Isn't it comforting to know that you think that you know it? So in a way, it actually happens a lot for negative outcomes. The outcome that you don't really like, actually, that you actually have that I knew it all along. Because it kind of protects you from the, the disappointment and, feeling not good about the outcome, actually.
It's like a cheating boyfriend, right? Then, any girl who's been through a situation be like, yeah, I knew he was cheating all along. It's like, how, if you knew, then you would not be in that situation. So, but like you said, it's just comforting for you to say, yeah, I knew it all along. Because again, like you said, it gives great joy and motivation to know that you were right all along, even though not necessarily. So it's a very, very interesting undiscussed topic. Right?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And it is undiscussed. Not a lot of people know about it. But I wonder, as a clinical psychologist, have you come across this tendency, this habit among your patients? Because I'm sure you listen to a lot of patients, or maybe people around you.
Generally, when it comes to patient settings, they don't really come and tell me I knew it all along or things like that. So in clinical terms, we don't really use this to actually help them to actually assess their judgments and decision making. But when it comes to, it's like such a natural phenomenon that you don't really look and you say, you need to fix that. You need to fix that. That's wrong, So I would say not really. I just come across it in daily life, I think,
And you have a giggle on the side. Hindsight bias. Right. How does hindsight bias affect our decision making though? Because like you said, we don't know the severity or like even if it will affect our decision making. So I'm actually very curious, how does hindsight bias, or somebody who is constantly having this, I knew it all along attitude, how does it affect the decision making of that person? And can it actually affect the decision making of that particular person?
Yes, it can. So once again, going back to being overconfident. So when you're overconfident, you don't really assess what's going on. I mean, like the pros and the cons. You just jump to like a decision because you think that, whatever I do and, it's going to turn out good because, all this while I've predicted something and it worked out fine for me.
Right.
So you don't really look at the pros and the cons because you're overconfident about the whole situation. So it kind of affects your decision-making process. And, you don't really know about it as well, but it happens. So the thing is, like, people, unless they know what hindsight bias is, then they can actually, fix it. But if not, then that's the risk of it, having hindsight bias.
But there is definitely because we talked about the positive consequences and also the negative consequences. Do you think it is imperative for someone to get rid of this tendency off of themselves?
I think if you do it too much, yes, of course. You need, like, someone has to tell you, like, I think you do this quite a bit because, you can't just want to feel good about the decisions and, that you actually knew what was going on. That means you're actually not looking at the what has happened in the event. And you're not really, analyzing it as in or learning from your mistakes or admitting that it was a mistake. So of course there are like those kind of effects onto a person and things like that. So to actually fix it would be good, but if you can't, if you don't know about it, I would say people who know about it, tell them like, okay, I think you gotta fix something about this.
I guess when you get overexcited over about the feeling of being right, you forget. So I'm guessing that emotion, does it play a part in hindsight bias?
I suppose feeling good. Feeling good is what it is, I think. And also, like, you get to actually share that particular, I knew it all along thing with your friend and tell your friend about how you discovered that, that particular phenomenon, event happened like that, So I guess it's not something so bad, I think, at some point or other. But of course, there are certain negative effects into the community and such because it does affect research because researchers will start thinking they'll get overconfident about what it is and they don't look back into like, things that they're supposed to look at. So onto the community on a very big scale, yes, there is some kind of, effect onto it.
Oh, interesting. Just now on the screen we had the 3 levels of hindsight bias. Can you quickly just let us know again? We're going to recap what are the 3 levels of hindsight bias.
You mean the
graph, the pyramid that we showed earlier on just now. So I saw a little bit of memory distortion at the bottom. So what are the other 2?
The other 2 is the belief of knowing that something is predictable or foreseeable, and I think inevitability, the belief of thinking that an event is going to be it's going to happen anyway, and it's inevitable. So these are the things that actually leads to hindsight bias.
I see. There we go. We have it right over here. So one last thing before we go, do you have any advice, any last words to our audiences who are at home, who possibly want to tell their friends or family, hey, hey bro, you don't know everything, bro. You don't know everything. You know, this might be a case of hindsight bias. Any advice?
I say if you know what it is and you see someone who's actually doing it quite a lot, it's better to let them know that, you know, it's better that you research on it and to find out about it and see whether you're you're overconfident about your decision-making process. If not, I guess it's all fun for me. If not, it's all fun. I think it's just a phenomenon in psychology that this happens in our lives. Yeah.
Imagine if this tendency exists in authorities or governing bodies, for example, they will keep making bad decisions, and that is definitely a negative consequence of hindsight bias. But thank you so much, SHAZEEMA MASHOOD SHAH, for coming, the Director and Clinical Psychologist of WeCare Allied Health Centre. This is a very, very interesting topic, and actually this is very important for you guys to tell about this to your friends and family, and if they have it, maybe you can ask them nicely to actually think about their rational and decision-making after this.
Definitely. You know what? Once I start watching all my K-dramas, I'm going to stop trying to predict what's going to happen the next scene for fear that, you know, hindsight bias will develop even more.